Afternoon. We are here for the El Segundo City Council special meeting, May 4th, for the budget study session. We are conducting this meeting as a hybrid. Council is back on the dais, and the public is able to access via Zoom. Chamber is currently closed to the public with the exception of special presentations and public communications, which will come later in our regularly scheduled open council meeting. And we're going to have we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Council Member Giroux, then we'll go straight to roll call. Thank you, Councilmember Giroux. Okay, we've got roll call. Madam Clerk, please.
Councilmember Giroux.
Here.
Councilmember Nickel.
Here.
Councilmember Perstuck. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Pimentel.
Here.
And Mayor Boyles.
Here.
Alrighty.
Okay, now is the time and place for public communications. Do we have anyone here to speak in person or on Zoom?
This is Mona Schilling. There is no hands raised for public communication for Zoom.
Thank you, Mrs. Schilling. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to the city manager at this point.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, can you hear me okay? Some of you have to look through 3 layers of glass. 4 if you count these. Okay. Thank you. It's staff's pleasure to present to you or to go through the budget study session for the next fiscal year, which would start on July 1st, so fiscal year 2021 through 2022. This will be a tag team effort between Joe Lilio, your Chief Financial Officer, and myself. We'll do the best we can, and if the eyes are watering, it's because of the face mask in this, not because of the content. So that's my attempt at humor. Okay, let's go. I'll start us off. Okay, so here's the agenda, the outline. I'll do an overview of the study session, what we intend to cover, a little bit of background, how we got here. Joe will walk you through the proposed budget, high level, walk you through the revenues, the appropriations, and how we propose to balance the budget. And then I'll do the CIP piece of that, and then I'll talk about the next steps. Oh, and just so council is aware, the department heads are nearby. They're watching this live, and should we need any of them to come in, they can be here in a moment's notice. Okay, so as a reminder, on April 20th, the last meeting you did look at the strategic plan, the 3-year strategic plan, and you offered some suggested revisions for the, our background items are going to be the strategic plan, then we're going to talk about budget status for the current year and pension obligation bonds. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so when you went through the strategic plan, it was a very fruitful discussion, and you did request some revisions. These will come back to you on June 15th with the proposed budget during the budget hearing. And if you concur with our follow-up, then that'll be rolled into the budget and the 3rd year of the strategic plan. So you did propose revisions to the vision statement. I did provide you with the copy of the internal staff memo following your direction. So we're moving forward on the revisions to the vision statement, revisions to the values and culture language in the strategic plan. I'm not going to go over that now, just touching base with you. And then you did request on top priority number 4 to have language in there about recreation facilities, top priority number 7, zoning and housing revisions. And then broad goal number 5, there were 3 areas that you asked us to include. 1 dealing with fiscal sustainability, 3 components to that, and then to pursue language working with the mayor on the business incubator concept, and then some language in there about implementing the Smoky Hollow parking components of the Smoky Hollow specific plan. So we are moving along as directed, and we'll have that at the June 15th public hearing. Now I'm going to turn it over to Joe Lilio, our finance director, and he'll walk you through the current year briefly.
Yeah, so Mayor Boyles, good afternoon, council members. Just real quick, this is also for the edification of those watching via Zoom or the internet. So this was presented to City Council at the last council meeting. This is the mid-year where we are anticipating where we're going to end this year as of June 30th. So I won't go over it line by line, but it's high level. We're anticipating about $1.7 million above the revenues we anticipated when we adopted the budget. And that's mainly driven by federal grants, one-time grants, and federal reimbursements by FEMA. Expenditures on that side of the house, almost identical, 1.6 million in increased appropriations. And there, real quick, 750 to non-departmental. Again, that was because we have a higher than anticipated number of people retiring and the payouts of their accrued leave banks that they're entitled to per the MOU. So council did approve that additional appropriation. And then the 200,000, the city manager's budget, that was for additional LAX mitigation contractual services. And then the COVID response is the all hazard incident management team, 688. So we have to show the expenditure side, which we were reimbursed for by FEMA. So we adopted a balanced budget, and we're anticipating a balanced budget at June 30, 2021. And I'll just focus real quickly on the very bottom number here. So the column says year-end estimate all the way down. So we are meeting our 20% reserve, $16 million, and we do have almost $2.3 million in additional unassigned reserves above our 20% policy. So quick update on the pension obligation bonds. So we are in the process of completing our fourth draft. Actually, it just occurred yesterday of the preliminary official statement. The credit rating review, so that's between the city's finance team and the credit rating agency. That's going to happen on May 10th. That's Monday next week. We should receive the credit rating from Standard & Poor's. That's who we're having the meeting with later that week, so hopefully by May 14th. On May 18th, we will be bringing the approval of the preliminary official statement. And just so everyone knows, also watching from outside of council chambers, the preliminary official statement is the equivalent to the Bible for the bond issuance. It's a very thick book that has all the financials of the city, the history of the city, and all the legal terminology on it. So council is expected to approve that or we're bringing it to council on May 18th, and also purchase of the bond purchase agreement. And then the pricing of the bonds, that's when our finance team, so the municipal advisor and the bankers involved, will bring the bond issuance to the marketplace to see the interest in it. That happens May 25th, and then bring it to market for sale by June 4th or sooner. And then just to share with the council, there's another South Bay agency that brought their POBs last week to market. It was a $90 million issuance. They had over $600 million in interest for it, so that's incredible. And they were able to get a AAA rating, and it was 2.72%, so 272 basis points that they received for their bond issuance. Pension obligation bond updates is continued, so we're anticipating to bring the POBs the council for a 19-year bond issuance. There could be some flexibility. It could be 18 years, but 19 is what we've been presenting to council from the beginning. This will provide budgetary relief to the city, so totaling just over $86 million budgetary relief, present value equivalent to just under $63 million. Again, that's over the 19-year life of the bond. So if you average that out, that's about $4.5 million a year from a budgetary perspective, 3.3 from present value. The first year savings is estimated, again, this is a budgetary perspective, $1.1 million. Year 18, the budgetary savings is expected at about $6.6 million, and at the final year, just under $250,000. And just remind council, so we did shift from our federal fiscal year, which we have been at for many years. So that's October 1st through September 30th. The current year in right now is a 9-month abbreviated budget from October 1st, 2020 through June 30, 2021, and then we'll reset to the 12-month budget beginning July 1st. And so then we'll be on the traditional budget cycle that about 95% of cities are on, July 1st through June 30. So this is a snapshot of all the funds. This is the revenues. So we'll go over the revenues first, real high level. General fund being vast majority at 74.8 million, about 58.6%. So all funds totaling 127,350,000. I'll just touch on a couple of them here. So again, I did touch on the general fund, and we'll go into detail what makes up that 74.8 million in subsequent slides. Water fund at about 35.7 million. And you want to look at the column that's to the right. It says proposed fiscal year 21-22. To the left, the adopted 2020-21, which is the current year. Remember, it's a 9-month abbreviated budget, so that's why you're seeing the large differences there. So again, the water fund, about 35.7 million. This does include the Prop 218 process that we went through with the water rate increase effective January 1st, 2022. So that's a rate increase halfway through the fiscal year. That is in there. Wastewater fund, 5.5 million. The rate increase effective, took effect this April. So that is in there beginning in July. And then there's another one increase for the wastewater that is effective January 1st, 2022. That's built in there as well. So I won't go over all these other funds. Maybe another one I will touch on would be the transportation fund. So $1.6 million. That's your Measure M, Measure R gas tax. That is slightly down compared to pre-COVID levels. And that's really due to sale of gas is down. So that does impact some of those transportation fundings. Proposed appropriations. So again, general fund is the largest portion of the total.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, sir.
Councilor Purse.
I just have a question, not on the numbers, but just on the presentation, not from what you're doing great, but when I'm looking at this and for the public to see this, what 54% is in the general fund?
Correct.
And I know you have these broken down by fund types. Is there a way that we could see what that general fund is also broken down, or do you have that? Because it's such a huge number that, we have something that represents 0.1% up here, but we have maybe something that represents 20% that we're not seeing because it's lumped into general fund. So just from transparency reasons, can we actually, going forward, or start looking at how we can blow that down a little bit, more granular from the general fund, just so that it's a little more, paints a picture?
Yeah, great question, Councilmember Perstek. So when we get to subsequent slides, that is actually broken down. So I'm just providing right now just a high level, and then we'll get into the minutia of the general fund, both on the revenue side and the appropriation side by department. So it'll be broken down by police, fire, and so on. So yeah, again, I'll just real high level. 142 million is our total appropriations. I'll just touch on a couple big ones here. So general fund, water fund, and really that 30 million, vast majority of that is the purchase of water from West Basin. So it's both potable water and recycled water. Wastewater fund, that 5.8 million, again, vast majority of that is the Hyperion contract. Well, about 2.7 million of that is the Hyperion contract. And then the other makeup of that is capital that the city will be doing to its own wastewater infrastructure and personnel. Any specific questions on some of the other funds before we get into details?
Joe, I want to make sure that people understand that the debt service fund has nothing to do with the POBs. That is on the Douglas Street closure, and not that's old money, not new money.
That is correct. Yes, sir. Okay. Okay, so now we're looking at a more granular level for the general fund revenues. So I'm going to start at the revenues, and then we'll move into the appropriations. So revenues, so for next year, sales tax is expected to be the number one revenue source for the city at $12,250,000, about just a little over 16% of the total general fund revenues. And I'll get into some more detail about each one of these in a subsequent slide, whether it's up or down. Business license tax, $11,750,000. So I do want to touch on this one real quick. For 2021, we did anticipate, because of COVID, a 17% reduction. So we adopted the current year budget 17% down from our pre-COVID levels. And that actually, the business license tax came in at about $11.7 million this year. That was a 7% decrease from pre-COVID. So what the city is anticipating is something very, very similar for next year. So business license go out, the renewals go out early December. December and January, we do receive our business license tax revenue. And there is a CPI that is associated with it. This year, it was 1.4. Next year, we don't know what it will be yet, but we traditionally use the October CPI. It looks like trends are indicating that CPI could be higher, but we're anticipating, again, flat revenue compared to what we received this year for next year. And we do believe that is a conservative approach. Property tax revenues, $9.8 million. TOT, I will touch on this on a subsequent slide. So pre-COVID, we were at just a little over 15 million. And so again, next year represents 12 months. We're only anticipating about 8.4 million. If COVID had not occurred, we probably would have been on track to reach about $15.2, $15.3 million. So you can see we're about $7 million down in the TOT compared to the pre-COVID levels.
Hey, Joe, quick question.
Yes,
Didn't
Mayor.
dawn on me in our first session. On the property tax, we had some really large commercial office building sales in 2020. Did those reassessments hit right away, or do those usually typically take time affecting property?
So what happens is the county, every January, they make the assessments for what they're billing in October, what's due in October, and what's due in March of the following year. So if that sale occurred prior to January, yes. Otherwise, then it takes a whole year to catch up. And we've been averaging 8 to 9% increase per year over the last 4 years in property tax. So it's and this year is no different. We're up a little over 8%.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So again, total revenues for general fund, 74.8 million. I'm just gonna touch on a couple here. So sales
Joe,
tax.
can I ask one last question? I don't want to hold you up too much on the last one, but for fines and forfeitures, that anticipates the return to parking enforcement and courts being open for any of the litigation we have going on? Not litigation, excuse me, criminal proceedings we have going on where we would achieve some fines, forfeitures, and reimbursements?
So the fines and forfeitures does include the parking citations. That's the bulk of what's in here. There's some other, other miscellaneous ones, but it's not, we're not anticipating going back to pre-COVID levels, but higher than where we were last year.
Thank you.
So sales tax is, and when I say up or down, I'm comparing to pre-COVID. So we, going back to 18, 19. So sales tax is down about 2% for 21, 22. And really what's driving that is just lower fuel sales. Gas stations in El Segundo have been considerably lower, the sales compared to pre-COVID levels. We're anticipating that will slowly pick up as businesses come back online and have their employees come back to work, but we're not anticipating to go back to 100% pre-COVID levels. Business license tax, again, we're down about 7% pre-COVID. This year, we did budget 70% lower, so we're a little too conservative this year. 7% is where it is trending, 7% down. Property taxes, I already previously mentioned, are up about 8%. We have been year over year over the last 4 years. And the trend, so we work with consultants, HDL's our property tax consultant. They provide a 5-year trend, and they have all the out years going up anywhere from 8 to 6%. So we're going to see healthy returns moving forward in property tax as well. Transit occupancy tax. So this is where the city's really getting hit hard. Down 45% to pre-COVID levels. So I do get monthly reports that show the hotel occupancy plus the room rate, or the rack rate. October 1st of 2020 through the end of February 2021, we were averaging about 45 to 48% occupancy rates. That's pretty low. Pre-COVID, we were in the low 90s, so almost half. In addition to that 45 to 48% occupancy, the room rates have been significantly reduced. That varies from hotel to hotel, but I would say on average, room rates are down 35 to 40%. So those two factors, occupancy and the room rate, is what makes up the TOT. And while we're anticipating that things will slowly improve, the occupancy and the room rates, we're not anticipating we will get back to pre-COVID level. Now, we could, and like I said, I do get a monthly report, and I'll be reporting this to Scott Mitnick, the city manager, monthly, and I do a quarterly report, financial report to city council. So every quarter, I would be moving forward. I would be providing that. TOT will be watching it very closely to see where we're at. Chevron tax resolution agreement. So that is adjusted each year. There's a floor on what they have to pay, the dollar amount they have to pay, and that is adjusted each year by inflation. And again, here we're anticipating 1% inflation. It could be a little bit higher. And then the UUT, utility users tax, we're projecting it's going to be flat.
Joe, sorry, you might have mentioned this. The sales tax, how often do you get reports on that?
So we do use HDL again for that as well, and we do receive quarterly detailed reports from HDL. So they dive down not just into what type of business sector it is, but they actually get into each individual business and what's going on and trends with them.
I don't remember where I heard this, but the Fed is now looking to more granular transactional data, like daily point of sale in certain parts of the economy, to get a sense of a leading indicator. So it strikes me that this is our biggest revenue quarter, revenue category. Waiting a quarter is a long time, just as a general observation. If there's any way we could get that data in advance. Because it could be that we're growing much faster than you expect too.
Correct. Yeah, I can work with HDL to get that. Now for El Segundo, that's all. Sales tax really has not grown over the last 5 to 6 years. It's remained pretty flat. So we've been getting anywhere between the high 11 millions and the mid 12 millions over the last 5, 6 years. And there's different reasons for that. One, we don't have large retail. We don't have any car dealerships. And over half of our sales tax comes from B2B. So, but yes, absolutely, Mary. We can work with HDL.
How did I'm just curious, the B2B, I never heard that before. That's interesting that over half comes from B2B. Makes sense. Is that a part of, I forget who governs it, Sales Board of Equalization or something, that they have to self-report on that, or is that taxed at the time of purchase?
So it depends. So some of it is the user's tax, which is self-reporting, and some is at time of purchase, depending what it is. But it's CDTFA is their acronym. I forget exactly what it stands for right now, but it used to be BOE, and they abolished that and created CDTFA, a new division to oversee sales tax at the state level.
Just out of curiosity, I know occasionally the Board of Equalization used to do audits. I've had friends that have experienced that, where they'll send you a questionnaire and then dig in. Is that something they're still doing with the reorganization, the renaming of that group, that agency?
They are, and also our consultant, HDL, does that.
Okay, thanks.
So that we've recouped several $100,000 each year because of HDL's audits. Okay, I kind of already did touch on the TOT, but we're anticipating, some hotels 55%, and some will be at 65%. So a range of 55 to 65% occupancy rate and lower room rates, and down about 7 million again to pre-COVID.
So, Joe, before he goes on, this is the main culprit to our challenge in the current fiscal year and next fiscal year's budget. This is the main challenge for us.
We'll get into the a little bit more detail later, but as I did mention, we get this report monthly from the TOT, so we'll be able to see as soon as that starts improving. And when we come to mid-year, hopefully all the information that we've received to develop this budget is incorrect. I don't like being correct, but I hope I am on this one, and it's actually improving better. And we'll be able to maybe come to mid-year with, some choices that council can make because our revenues are improving. The appropriation side, so this is broken down, again, this is general fund, proposed 21-22 budget. So this is broken down by department, and we have an order of highest appropriation request to lowest. And then police, we have a 23.7, fire next at 17. So between police and fire, public safety, we're at just a little over $40 million. And then public works 9.2, and then community services number 4, around 6.3 million. Now community services, which is recreation programming, libraries, we are anticipating most of the programming coming back online. So that is built into this budget. The fireworks show is built into the budget. We do have one other important piece to mention is the plunge. We do have anticipated the plunge remaining closed until October 1st. So that is built into this budget as well. Okay, so total operating, this does not include capital, but total operating budget, $77.3 million. This is significantly lower than where we were at 2019-20. So we had adopted budget of just over 80 million back in 19-20. Transfers out to the CIP, that's 225,000, and again, there'll be a subsequent slide where what makes up that 225,000. So we'll go over that in a minute. And this is, since I've been here with the city, I've been here 5 years. This is the lowest amount that we're transferring out of the general fund to support CIP projects. So really, this is really a bare bones, no frills budget. And I'm going to get into some subsequent slides, some of the reductions that we've asked departments to do. So total general fund, so operating plus the capital, $77.5 million.
Joe, are we going to see inside any of these in subsequent slides what the fund pieces, or just some? Are you going to go through the structures and freezes, or are you going to look at?
Yes, yeah, we're going to go over not line item by line item, but yes, higher level. Okay, so a quick snapshot. So we're anticipated to start the fiscal year at $18.2 million in unassigned fund balance for the general fund. Estimated revenues, which I went over, $74.8 million. The proposed, that should say 21-22 appropriations, $77.5 million. Estimated ending fund balance, $55.5 million. 20% reserve is exactly where we need to be, so leaving no unassigned fund balance remaining after our 20% policy. Now I'm going to walk into some of the details of how we developed this budget. When we first started the budget process back in late January, and there's a lot that goes behind it, meeting with all the departments, and fine-tuning things, meeting with the city manager, and further fine-tuning things. we started off with a $9 million deficit. And this, what you're seeing in front of you is the proposal to close that $9 million gap. And again, I'm going to go into those details here in a minute. So 21-22 budget gap, again, that $9 million I just talked about. Primary causes are the TOT revenues down by $7 million, which we touched on, rise in pension costs from PERS, and then labor contracts. So that's built in here. There are numerous labor groups that have MOUs that go through 2022 and 2023, and those cost drivers that are in the MOU, whether it's COLA increases or increases in medical, that's built into the budget, and that's in there. There are two labor groups whose contracts end September 30th, 2021, and that's the police POA and the fire FFA. So there are no new salary or benefit increases built into the budget for those two groups since their MOU ends September 30th. So the strategy that we took to close this $9 million gap, and there's going to be more detail in subsequent slides as well, is one-time use of the OPEB trust fund, $2.4 million. So that $2.4 million is reflective in our revenue side of the house. And OPEB trust, so everybody is clear what that means. City has two main trust funds. This one is for retiree health. So as employees retire from the city, and as long as they're vested into their retiree health, there's a vesting period, I believe it's 5 years, they're entitled to retiree health per their MOU. And the city has been pre-funding that since 2008. We opened up this OPEB trust 2008. Today there's a balance of about $32.2 million. That represents a funding level of 58% of our total liability for the retiree health. Per our actual report that we get done, we're on track to be fully funded by 2030, 2031. And we actually stopped making contributions to that trust this year. We were previously making $548,000 contribution each year because we got to a funded level where the investment earnings will get us to 100% funding level, the actual report, which drives what we need to contribute or not. It's at zero contributions moving forward. And the anticipated investment earnings for the current year, which is, they look at it from a traditional fiscal year of July 1 through June 30, the report anticipated that the city would have investment earnings of about $1.85 million. We've already had $5.1 million, and we're not even to September 30th yet. So by withdrawing the one-time withdrawal of $2.4 million, we would still have the actual investment earnings of the 1.85 plus some, and we'd still be on track to not make any further contributions and to get the 100% funded level by the 2031 level time frame. And the way the OPEB trust works is the city pays the retiree health bill to CalPERS monthly. And the city would be able to reimburse itself through the trust. Obviously, there's substantiation. We have to show the trust that we did actually pay CalPERS for the retiree health bill. But the piece that I like about this, it gives the city the flexibility to wait until mid-year to see how we're doing, evaluate. If we're actually doing better than we anticipated, we don't have to pull from the trust. If we are doing as we expected or worse, then we have the ability to pull from the trust and to help balance the budget and still be ahead of the game where we're anticipated to be with the OPEB trust. So that's $2.4 million that's built into the revenues. One-time use of general fund balance. So again, this is the excess of the 20% policy. So 20% policy says we need to be funded at $15.5 million. In reserves, this 2.2 is above and beyond that. Freezing 18 vacant positions, saves about $2 million. Reduction to operations, and I'm going to get into subsequent slides what those 18 positions are. Reduction to operations and maintenance. 1.5 million, so we went back to each department. And first of all, we told them, beginning in January, when we kicked off the budget, there's no new O&M requests. You have to start where you started this year, which was already a 15% reduction. And then we came back about a month ago and told the department heads, you have to come up with another 10% reduction on top of that. And that represents 1.5 million. And then a reduction to the equipment replacement funding, 50% reduction, which represents $900,000 savings to the city. And even with this, we will still be funded a little bit over a 90% confidence level with our equipment replacement fund. So that still puts us in an excellent position, and we'll get the full funding in subsequent years. So it represents closing the gap of $9 million where we were at. And some quick items here on the personnel details. So salary and benefit adjustments based on multi-year MOUs, that is built in there. Police and fire, as I previously mentioned, that expires September 30th this year. Pension obligation bonds issued in June 2021. So that is built into the budget. And that stable annual payment of just under $10.5 million, that is built into the appropriation side. Minimum hourly wage impact. So this minimum wage increase was passed several years ago, where it went from $10 and we're going up to $15. So January 1st, 2022 is the last year of that 5-year increase that brings minimum wage in LA County to $15 an hour. Now, obviously, that impacts our part-timers, and that will be brought to City Council probably in November to adjust the part-time salaries. So frozen positions. Just to remind council, for 2021, so the current year, we did freeze 22 positions, and these were vacant positions, so there was no one laid off. For 21-22, we're anticipating freezing 18 positions. And again, these are our vacant positions. And when I say 18, that's full-time equivalent. So it's 12 and a half vacant positions frozen full fiscal year, 10 positions frozen for part of the year. That brings us to the equivalent of 18 full-time positions frozen for the whole year. And then overtime was reduced by $130,000 as well. And here's, this is where we were this year. 22 frozen positions. Snapshot to remind council what we did for this year. Here's what we're proposing for 21-22. So proposing a police position, freezing 5. There's currently 10. This is sworn and non-sworn. So there's currently 10 vacant positions in police, so freezing 5. That does include a lieutenant, a sergeant, 3 police officers, and I believe 1 non-sworn position, which may be a PSO, I believe. Oh, sorry, 2 officers. So a lieutenant, a sergeant, 2 officers, and PSO. Fire, there are currently 3 vacant positions, proposing 2.5. Public Works, 12. There's currently 12 vacant positions, and we're proposing freezing 4.5. Community Services, which is Recreation and Library, currently 2. We're proposing freezing 1.5. And then Development Services, there's 2 vacant, and here proposing freezing 1. That's really 2 positions, and by the time we're filling it, it's going to be equal to 1. Finance, again, we're proposing freezing 1 position. That's within the Treasury Division. IT, there's 3 vacant positions. We're proposing freezing 1.5. And then HR, there's currently 2 vacant positions. We're proposing freezing 0.5. And again, that's just for the timing of filling those 2 positions. So we're strategically putting in the budget when they're gonna get filled.
Joe, those fire positions, are any of those support positions, or are all those frontline,
For fire,
the 3 fire? I'm guessing 2 and 1 support and 2 firemen?
for the fire, it's 1 sworn. And then the other 1.5 is non-sworn.
Joe, can you say what they are, the actual position?
Absolutely. We have the fire marshal, which, frozen the whole year.
So that's an individual who retired, so that position is proposed to stay frozen the entire year.
Correct, and it's currently vacant right now. Fire prevention specialist, frozen part of the year. And then, firefighter paramedic.
And the police chief and fire chief are available if you have questions of them.
Yes, and then I did touch on HR, and then, other departments, there's a half of a position there. So that totals 18, again, strategically frozen positions, which represents about 6.5% vacancy level. So I've been here for 5 years, and even without doing this, we've constantly been at a vacancy of anywhere from 25 to 40 positions since I've been here. So this is, I think, this is a good way of strategically identifying which positions are going to be frozen. I do know both the police chief, Chief Whalen, and the fire chief, Chief Donovan, are here. I don't know if Chief Whalen, are you available to speak?
City council, they are available if you'd like them to answer any questions or make any comments. Because I do believe, in fairness, the police chief wanted to make a comment.
Yes.
I did. Thank you, City Manager. Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members. I appreciate the opportunity to address you today about the police department budget. Regarding the personnel costs, the budget being presented to you is recommending a continuation and across-the-board freezing of currently vacant positions. While I understand the rationale behind this approach, it is problematic for the police department and has resulted in the degradation of our service level. I'm going to present you with an alternative that will accomplish requisite monetary savings without handicapping our ability to serve this community. I briefed both the city manager and the chief financial officer on this recommendation, and we both concurred that we can achieve the requisite budgetary savings by using this approach. By way of background, when I was hired in 2017, I committed to then city manager Greg Carpenter and the city council that I would conduct a thorough and exhaustive review of the police department, and I would bring forward an organizational plan that would best serve our community. As part of this review, I met with community stakeholders. I reviewed the reports from 2 prior consultants who conducted staffing analysis of the El Segundo Police Department. I hired a management consultant with law enforcement expertise to review our organizational structure and provide recommendations. I surveyed all of the law enforcement agencies in the state of California through an organization known as the California Police Chiefs Association, and I spoke directly with the other Los Angeles County Chiefs of Police. I combined all of this with my over 30 years of law enforcement experience, as well as my direct experience doing law enforcement staffing analysis at other law enforcement agencies. And the results of this review was an organizational structure that we've deployed since January 2018. Now, as an outside chief of police, I was able to make these recommendations without any emotional ties to the existing structure. And as evidence of this, we eliminated several positions to include 1 police lieutenant. And the structure we have now is what I believe is the minimum necessary to effectively respond to the needs of our community, as well as the continuously evolving law enforcement landscape. Because of this, my ask of City Council is to not freeze supervisory and management positions, but rather allow me the discretion as the Chief of Police to move people into positions as I believe necessary to maintain the proper functioning of our police department and to allow for proper succession planning. We currently have 6 sworn vacancies, and with expected retirements, we are not going to be able to fill these vacancies this year. We will likely end the fiscal year exactly as we are now with 6 sworn vacancies. So by default, we will achieve the financial savings being asked of us without additionally refreezing a lieutenant and sergeant position. Now more than ever, managerial and supervisory oversight at a police department is of the utmost importance. Legislative changes impacting law enforcement at both the state and federal level have increased exponentially, and every one of these laws require analysis, policy revisions, and implementation at the operational level, not to mention the training that goes along with it. Nationally, every significant police issue can be traced to a failure at the supervisory or managerial level. With the increased accountability and transparency expected of a modern-day police department, we cannot afford to freeze these positions. It not only impacts our current operations, but it also sets the stage for significant liability in the future. So in conclusion, my ask is to freeze 4.5 police officer positions and no further sworn positions. This is the number indicated by finance that is necessary to achieve the required budgetary savings, and we can certainly adjust this number as necessary if we get revised numbers from finance. Freezing officer positions will not impact our operations, as we will not have the ability to hire enough recruits to fill these vacancies in this fiscal year. Additionally, at the officer rank, I have the greatest ability to move the chess pieces around so that we don't have degradation of service and we provide the level of service that our community expects. So I respectfully request that you consider this request as you move forward with the budget process, and I'm available to answer any questions that you have.
I got a couple questions. One is, was this recommended well before this meeting? And if so, what's the city manager's position and the CFO's position? And secondarily, what is the net effect? Are the numbers the same? And why wasn't that presented? I guess why wasn't that presented as an alternative?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I believe the numbers are the same. So it's a policy question. Freeze the police officer position or a sergeant, police officers or sergeant, or go for upper management. And it really is a policy decision as to what is best for the overall department. Having received input from council members and what you've said in public or at council meetings and in one-on-one discussions, I know this is tough. And if you're asking for a recommendation, I think waiting and seeing what happens, because the uncertainty on our revenues, they're very real. And I guess the best compromise, you pay us for our candid professional advice, and I know this is tough, and there are times we can't please everybody all the time. But I would say maintaining the lieutenant, freezing that for the year, and then doing a check-in midway through the year will help us achieve the overall objective. Because council has said you want as many officers on the street as possible. You made that abundantly clear. And with that goal in mind, that would be the path we'd recommend. And I know it's tough, because I concur with the police chief and what he was saying. And if revenues weren't an issue, we would fully support it. We're not recommending that we cut any of those positions, at least in this economic environment. So I hope that provides some clarity.
So I understand the argument here is this presupposes that we'll freeze 5 positions, and the chief was advocating that we freeze none of them? Is that?
No, he's just saying that you freeze them at his chief's main interest, and we respect that, is to stay with the 5 lieutenants and to be able to fill them.
We have 4 right now. 4 filled?
Exactly. Is it 4 at the moment or 3?
So there's 5 authorized and 4 filled. I believe that's the case.
And 1 is vacant now. To balance the budget we're in, I'm sorry, it's frozen. We froze it.
Right.
So the chief's ask is to unfreeze that and let him fill that. Would ultimately to have the 5 lieutenants full, and then to freeze lower level positions. So it's a policy question. As far as the numbers, we'll get to the number that the chief needs to save on salaries. But it's how do you do that?
And currently, just so council has an idea, there's 2 captains, both of those are filled. 5 lieutenants authorized, 4 are filled, 1's frozen. 11 sergeants authorized, and I believe we have 1 frozen there, so 10 filled. And then as far as officers, I don't know if Chief's still on the line, but I believe 43 authorized, and there's 3 vacant right now.
Four vacant officers, 1
Four
sergeant,
vacant
1 lieutenant, 6 total sworn. And the reason for this request is because it's not as though it's an either-or conversation. It's not as like we're picking one over the other. We won't have the officers filled. Just like this year, we're coming in with a greater savings than asked of us because we can't fill the positions. So it's somewhat penalizing the police department if above and beyond what we already have vacant, we're asking for more vacancies, and it impacts our operations.
Scott, so answer me this. The goal here is to cut down the $9 million deficit. The overarching goal is that, correct?
Yes, sir.
So the ask from each department, in this case the chief, was to come up with a method to do that. So I guess my confusion is, if you're saying that the net is the same, whether we do option A or what Chief Whalen is asking for, I think I'm a little confused as to why that wasn't added in to begin with, because in the end, if we're tasking the chief with managing the operation, it seems to me that he's the expert on this. And if this is what he needs to get the job done, it seems to me that that's the best option. Now, I understand what you're saying in that we want more feet on the street, right? That's what we've said before. But I think with what he's saying is that you're not taking anything off the street right now.
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct.
You
Yes.
would just be taking the option to add to that right now. Is that accurate?
My understanding, right, is that the chief's position anticipates 6 retirements. So by adding 3, we would be net still 3 vacancies. Is that correct, Chief?
Looking at just holistically the entire organization, we currently have 6 vacancies. I know of right now 3 expected retirements this year. So we have no applicants that are anywhere near background stage in the process. So we're in a perfect world. If the current recruitment we just did, if we were able to find a couple people out of that, they wouldn't even enter the academy for anywhere from 4 to 6 months from now. And it would be another 6 months after that before they would actually be sworn police officers. So our 6 sworn will remain 6 sworn, and it might even increase over the next fiscal year, even with the hiring that we have going on.
So just my final thing here on this is that if the net is what we wanted it to be anyway, my feeling is that if we hired the chief to run his department and he's the best one suited to make that decision, I would tend to go along with what he's saying.
I got it. What I heard the chief say is that he's going to be short 4.5 regardless. He doesn't think he can fill them for the entire year. So that if you factor that in addition to the management changes that we're considering, he's going to save even more than what's anticipated. Is that accurate, Chief?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
From a timing standpoint, that's correct.
Okay. And, all right, any other comments from colleagues? Chris?
I would only say that we are, if we have a 10% overperformance in TOT, then we can make adjustments to these things at any point. We can unfreeze. We're not bound to a freezing cycle. You know, if all of a sudden things come roaring back after June, and at the end of summer we are pushing ahead, there can be all manner of tweaks we do to with our frozen salary positions and our OPEB reimbursement plans. Because 10%, any 10% overage on TOT is right at $1.75 some million, which is significant for a pretty minor switch. I fully understand. You know, no general's ever shown up and said I have too many troops, and so I sort of endorse the position. But I think that we can both be on the same side of the table on this, and you know, label it frozen or vacant. You know, waiting to see where we end up in the recovery. To me, maybe I'm a little bit more conservative on this. I just have concerns about our spend if things don't come back. Particularly, I mean, I think it's worth noting in this discussion, right? These are some of the most expensive, from a fiscal sense, positions in the city.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. I have similar concerns. I'm not comfortable borrowing from the OPEB. I know we have a surplus and we never need to fund it again, but I think that goes against the principle of what that OPEB fund was set aside for. I also want to acknowledge that last time we did a facilities needs assessment, we calculated needs for roughly $40 million. Well, what's happened to material pricing since then? Labor's up 3x. So that number's probably more like 60 million now, if not more. So I just want to remind everybody that we have probably about a year's of general fund revenue, the equivalent ahead of us in capital improvement, and we have no money to pay for that. You have 225,000 set aside for capital improvement, is that what I saw?
And new money.
250,000, or into the.
From the
no.
general fund. We're gonna get into, the entire
Okay.
CIP.
But can you just give us a ballpark on the CIP? What do we have allocated for that? Because I think that that's an important consideration when we look at this general fund. And the other question is, while you're looking up that, this is more for Scott. I know we've started the process of benchmarking our police and fire, or mostly police org structure relative to comparable agencies. I know you don't have the final results, but when you look at the preliminary results you've seen, where's the opportunity for us to reorg? Is it at the management level?
Believe it or not, I have that data and plan on sharing it as we get closer to June 15th because we're doing some fine tuning. But for example, we have the same management structure as Manhattan Beach. They have 2 captains, 5 lieutenants. I believe on the sergeant, I was just reading that, I have the data. The sergeants, it's the same. And then in the other cities that are the same size or larger, they have a similar management structure. So I was going to say, believe it or not, that's not the right way. Having 2 captains and 5 lieutenants, analytically speaking, is not out of the norm for a police budget of our size.
Okay, and then on the fire side, what % roughly of our service calls are EMS related?
Oh, I'm going to say 95%.
So we have 95%, like, and
Chief Donovan can correct me, but I've been watching the daily reports here. They're quite high. Very, very low for fire.
I think if we don't do it in this budget cycle, regardless of where the economy goes, at some point, we're going to have to address our overall org structure of public safety. And so I'm not comfortable with borrowing from OPEB to bridge the gap. I just feel strongly about that. And I also want to just reflect back on what former Mayor Sandra Jacobs said to me, was that back when she was mayor, and I think it was in the mid-90s, they actually did a bottoms-up zero-based budgeting exercise. And I know we brought that up several times, and I can't help but wonder if the budget would be different if we truly did a bottoms-up build without using historical starting points.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyway, I just want that to be known that I'm a little uncomfortable with borrowing from OPEB to fill the gap. I'd rather us find the money elsewhere, relying on the subject matter expertise of each department head.
If I can, and this is not so much a rebuttal, but just a clarification for people at home. This would not be a borrow from OPEB, right? This would be a reimbursement, which is an authorization for it. We're not having to reimburse OPEB for this. This is just taking money out of, it's grown more than we thought it would for this year, and it would be taking that cream off as a one-time reimbursement. So not a borrow, not something we have to repay. We're effectively repaying ourselves just earlier than we would anticipate.
My comments stand, but thank you for the clarification.
Mr. Mayor, to the police position conversation, I've always looked at the chief. He's the CEO of the police department. You know, he understands the financial position we're in. I don't think it's wise for 5 policymakers, one that has some experience in the law enforcement military realm. Okay, 2, but he was in it longer. I don't think it's our position to tell that chief how to run his department. We can encourage certain activities, more men and women on the ground, right, out there in the public. But at the end of the day, it's his decision to run that department, and we're the ones that hold his hand to the fire when it comes to, crime data. And with the new, it's RIPA, right? The RIPA stuff that's coming online, right, next January. So there is going to be a ramp up, and he is going to need to get personnel in place and training in place, and there's a mountain to climb this year, and I just think us taking a board member position and saying, nope, we're gonna freeze those spots, I don't think we should tie his hands on anything. I think we should be less of an impediment and more of a participant in his shared goal with ours.
I would ask you one question. Who are we going to hold accountable to the budget if we miss our numbers or we have a catastrophe? The buck stops with him, with assistance from him, not the chief of police. So I hear what you're saying. I'd be more comfortable if we said, the number's not large enough, let's find more money in each department head and let the department heads figure out where to find it. I'm just saying, I don't think we're going deep enough considering what we have ahead of us. That's all I'm saying.
And point well made. I think there's that other statement that I believe city manager has made, is that you can't cut your way to success. Here we are, we put strategic planning in the same breath as budget study session. And so here, we're like, we need to do this, and we want this, and we want more KPIs, and we want all this data, and we want more and more. And the reality is, the more we want requires either more humans, right, or more hours from the humans that we have. And so I'm with you. I think if we take the team that we have and just say, hey, work with what you have, but I really don't want to take more people away or freeze, because if you freeze spots and then positions open up through retirement and everything else, we may find ourselves in a position where it's, his budget is high because it's all overtime, because he doesn't have enough sworn officers to just fill the standard spots, let alone anything extra, right? So I hear where you're coming from, and yes, we have 2 direct reports, city attorney, city manager. So the way I see it is, it's the city manager's job in those ET meetings that he has weekly to be on top of the chief to say, where are you at? We need to bring this in, because if we don't bring this in, I have 5 bosses that are going to chew my head off, right? So I think that's where it is.
Do you need a vote on this today, or you're getting direction, you're going to come back to us later on anyway, right?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a study session to exchange ideas, and we're taking good notes, and we'll come back on June 15th with the
Any
recommendation.
further comments on this subject from anyone? Okay, I think we're good then, thank you.
No, the
Carol,
only
go
thing
ahead.
I just would, I'm sorry, Carol.
No, I was just going to concur with Scott and Lance. I think the landscape right now, we need, experienced officers out there, and I think, as to Scott's point is, we hired him to do a job and be a CEO of the police department, and let's let him do it.
Yeah, the thing you talked about doing a bottom up, this is essentially my first time through this. I had a little brief interlude last year with it, but in the end, I think that's an important piece, because inevitably what ends up happening is whoever ends up being up here just kind of carries on or from what's happened in the past. And I think when you get down to these types of things, it's going to be an important step. Now, I'm not saying we got to tear down your budget and build it all back up right now, but I do think that might be something for us to consider very seriously in the future for the next one.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that's also referred to as zero-based budgeting, where you start with 0, and then, how would you structure the organization going forward? And some cities have experimented with that. That's clearly an option.
Well, and we don't have to do it like Big Bang Theory. Like, we could pick a couple departments and start there, and then do it for the next, and then roll it out, so it's not so arduous for the finance department.
If I could just add maybe a little bit of context to that. So our general fund budget, typically it's 80% personnel, so salary benefits, 20% O&M, and of that 20%, good portion of that is fixed. Utilities. The city attorney is part of O&M because it's not, he's not an employee. So there's a lot of fixed components in that O&M. So when you come down to it, there's probably only, I would say, no more than 10% of that you really have flexibility, say where you're going to cut, and some of that will cut into service levels. So we don't have, I would say, a budget like a lot of other cities where they will be funding a maintenance fund, a CIP fund, healthy each year, and we don't have that here. and we don't have outside funding sources, special districts, business improvement districts, those type of sources to fund a lot of the capital or the ongoing maintenance of capital that was already constructed. And that here it's funded by the general fund. So there's a good portion of fixed costs, unfortunately, that are built into that O&M right now.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, although we are looking at those type of tools in the toolbox through our long-term financial strategic planning process, so we'll hit on that a little bit later. If council's okay, we could continue.
Carol had a
Oh,
council member
I'm so
start.
sorry.
No,
I'm sorry.
I was just thinking, so, you know, we created, you know, with the new, we just voted on with the Top Golf money that we're targeting the money for a specific thing. You know, as is there something we could put in place where, you know, a certain portion of development money goes toward our CIP? That it goes toward our capital improvements? Like, how do we structure, so, or like, do we say, you know, funnel some of them, right now it all goes to general fund and then we just apply what we want to the general fund, the CIP? Is there a way we could continue to modify or put some constraints about the revenues and so that it can go to the CIP? Because it seems like the CIP has been underfunded for many years, and that's why we're at the situation we are. So how do we ensure that the people who sit in these seats in the future don't have that same behemoth of a mountain to fund?
Are you suggesting similar to our equipment replacement fund?
Right.
How that's set up, we know what we need to replace, how far out, and we save each year towards that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess that is something that we could do, but to the mayor's point, the assessment of 40 million 2 years ago is 60 million now.
Right.
But it would still help us set aside
Just
some
something so
funds
we're
and save
constantly
year over
being
year.
aware of it.
Well, we have that, right? It's what, $6 million balance or something in it now, Joe? The CIP
We're-
fund?
we're gonna go-
We're gonna go, that's the next slide.
Yeah, and these are, Mr. Mayor, members of council, good discussion. There's all kinds of tools to help achieve this objective. Typically, what cities will do in California with the general fund is if you end the year and you have surplus funds or surplus appropriations that weren't spent and you achieved your reserve requirements, I'm accustomed that additional money rolls over into the CIP fund. So that'll help for the next year's budget for CIP projects. So those type of tools and behavior, we're going to recommend that you do. A year from now, or no, less than a year from now, 6 to 9 months, we're going to be in front of you with a proposal to do the biennial budget, the 2-year process with 2 one-year budgets, and the long-term financial strategic plan, which will put in front of you recommendations for like a building replacement fund, some clearer language on how to deal with CIP funding and that type of thing. So just best management practices. You're taking great steps through the strategic plan process right now. But in the meantime, we have to solve this $9 million nut. And we need our TOT revenues to get back on track. So
When are we gonna get to the CIP then? How far along is that?
we're like moments away.
Okay.
So these are more details about how we balance the budget.
So again, I already mentioned that we reduced O&M an additional 10%. Equipment replacement, I talked about, cut it by 50% this year and back to full funding next year. This is a snapshot here of going back 2 years.
Joe, I might have misunderstood something. Something Mayor Pro Tem said with me is now clicking. So the reimbursement, we're completely overfunded, or we just do not need to continue to fund the OPEB?
So for the OPEB trust, that's retiree healthcare, there's no new contributions into that trust required by the city.
So but are we overfunded?
No. So overfunded, assume that we're 100% funded of our liabilities.
So we're 100% funded forever. We never need to put additional funds in?
So we're 58% funded. And through investment earnings, the actuarial reports project us to be fully funded by 2030, 2031.
Relying on the
That's
investment earnings.
That's CalPERS actuarial results, which have been historically off, or no, somebody else's?
No, we use
Okay.
Bartel and Associates for that.
Okay. so we aren't borrowing, now I'm confused. Can you clear, maybe Chris?
And it's overgrown this year. This year we thought it would gain 2.5 million or something, and it's at 5.1.
Yeah, 1.85 was what the actuary report assumed with our investment strategy. And we've already have investment earnings of $5.1 million through March
And-
31st.
And we're not required of the same conservative, like bond makeup, right? We can
No.
be more equity.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
So even by pulling out that, if we have to, the strategy is let's wait till mid-year to see where we're at. And if we have to, through council's approval of that, which, we're not bringing the approval of the budget till June 15th. But if council's in favor of that strategy, and if things project, actually happen the way we're projecting it, then we would just pull out that 2.4 million from the trust to reimburse the city for costs paid to CalPERS for the retiree health care.
But it wouldn't deviate us from our maturation track.
Correct.
Right now, if we left it in, if we didn't have to touch that 5.1, we would just get to our fully funded, our 100% faster.
That is correct.
And you're not concerned about any of those assumptions the actuarials are using? You've got an outside firm, you feel good about it?
Very, very conservative. It's
Okay.
overperformed since I've been here.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So to this slide, so this goes back 2 years. It goes back to 1819, 1920, shows where 2021 is. That's where that white line, vertical line is. Balanced budget, and then the out years, going out 5 years, so 21, 22, and going all the way out to 2026. This is different than what you've seen in prior presentations, and that's because I've put in the POBs now. So that's definitely helped stabilize that delta between revenues and expenditures. What's not in there is any future MOU increases, so that's not built into this. Also, any potential new revenue sources are not built into this either.
And this chart, so if you see that line in 2021, the vertical thin line, that everything to the left is based on actual numbers, everything to the right is estimated. And this assumes that we spend 100% of the appropriations each year and we get 100% of the revenues. So we'll typically get a little bit more on the revenue and spend a little bit less, typically in a pre or post pandemic environment. This is this is good for illustration purposes.
And then
Joe,
that-
quick question. Do you have a sense of how much of our expenditures or appropriations going forward are subject to inflation? I mean, materials obviously, but would you anticipate wages going up significantly based on everything else going up around us?
So again, so we have the MOU increases built in, which they end different years, and I think the last one only goes through 2023. So that's not built in here.
But what about like assumptions about software contracts that aren't fixed and other expenses?
Those are built in. I think we have it, contractual increases, I believe we're assuming a 2% increase each year. 2 to 3, depending on what it is, 2 to 3% each year.
Okay.
Okay, so new budget request. So I'm gonna touch on the Cultural Development Fund. So this is also known as the 1% for the arts fee. So this is their request for 21-22. Fund a cultural arts coordinator, 75%. That would be equivalent to about $100,000. The other 25% would come from the general fund. And we did an analysis which included the Community Services Director, Melissa McCollum, and it was determined about 75% of this position would be focused on the Cultural Development Fund and those related activities. So that's how 75% was determined. Festival of Holidays, 60,000. Outdoor dining enhancements, 55. TEDx El Segundo, 50. And the Poet Laureate program at 8,000, so totaling 273,000. And I believe Melissa is on Zoom. She's available to answer any questions that council may have.
As is the commission's chair, and just as a reminder, the chair of the commission did present to you a recommendation like that, and subsequent to that, the chair requested some revisions to the last item there is a little bit lower, based on the feedback from city council. So both those individuals are available if you have questions.
I don't recall in the previous, his presentation did not call for a permanent staff. The cultural arts coordinator was not in that.
Oh, that's already in the budget. Council already approved that. This is the funding of that position. Yeah.
Oh, the library position.
Yeah, yeah. This is this is illustrating the funding of that position.
Got it. I thought that was additional headcount, not the library personnel.
No, that's not allowed, sir.
Hence my question.
I'm smiling, you can't see it.
Okay, no questions from city council? Okay.
I still want to understand, like, the Festival of Holidays. I want to make sure that this, those are some things that we're going to have to find a partner with as far as a nonprofit, because I'm not sure we as a city want to take on a Festival of Holidays on an annual basis. And I just want to make sure we frame this up so that we have success for the future, because if we're going to do this, like, we did the tree lighting, but it's very simple and it's very contained, but a Festival of Holidays takes a lot of effort, a lot of work. It really requires a nonprofit partnership to really take ownership of that, and then we could be a beneficiary of, or like a partner in it, but owning that type of festival is, we have never done that, and I just want to make sure we as a council want to move in that direction or not, but.
If you build it, he will come, right? So let them run with it. Let's see how it goes, right? And it may be so fantastic that people are like, this is great. We want this to happen every year. What do we need to do to make sure this happens every year, right? Just like the artwork or art walk, right? If you build it, he will come, and it's grown and they have corporate backing, right? And so it's very similar to, the mayor's, incubator idea, right? If you start,
I was going to say the menorah lighting, that was a grassroots effort maybe 8-10 years ago, and they do everything. I mean, we open up the city hall, give them an outlet, I think, and they do pretty much everything else, and it's a great event. So yeah, I agree. Okay, can we move? Council, good with moving on this slide? Okay, we're all good. Thank you.
Okay, information technology initiatives for 21-22. So IT strategic plan update, implementation of development services permitting systems, that's a big one. That's been in the works for a while now. PD mobile data computer replacement, or MDC. Upgrade of the city library systems, network infrastructure upgrade, design of citywide security cameras in conjunction with Public Works. Start enterprise resource planning, so new ERP systems, so the planning of it, not actually implementing a new system, but the planning of that. That is about a 2 to 3 year process. I've done that before at other agencies, but the first phase is kicking off the planning, and that's what we're anticipating doing. Citywide Smoky Hollow broadband solutions, finalize the graphical information system, GIS roadmap, and business license system to the cloud. So we did implement a new business license system about 3 years ago, moved to online. Businesses seem to love it. We went from a process that would take several months to now a matter of 48 hours. So we are going to plan on creating some enhancements to that and improving that customer experience even further and moving it into the cloud.
What's the citywide security camera? What is that? I mean, what is that?
I could answer that. Those are the cameras that are going, yeah.
The mic.
These are the cameras that we currently have that are not working very well. We are upgrading those cameras for the facilities such as police department and fire department in downtown area. A library. Yeah.
Understood.
For facilities, not other purposes.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
For security.
checking.
Yeah.
Are they equipped with facial recognition software?
I don't believe so.
I believe the answer is no. In California, it's a crime to both haze and tolerate hazing.
So I just have one question. On the business license system to cloud solution, that's one area that we have, and I know Chris Pentel and I have talked about, and Drew, about looking at our business license, the whole, the language in there. I just want to make sure that we make a modification to our language before we actually move that current language into the system. As far as, on our books, it talks about if you bring in a circus. I don't want to build a system around archaic language. So I just want to make sure that timing is cleaned up before we move on to a new system.
So some of that language can be cleaned up administratively, where staff can just bring those solutions. There are some things that need voter approval. For instance, the sales tax credit. There's also a late penalty credit. Those items would need voter approval, but just cleaning up, and Assistant City Attorney, Mr. King might correct me if I'm not speaking correctly, but what you're referring to, Councilmember Perstek, would be an administrative cleanup, and we can maybe bring the administrative cleanup to council over the next several months, get that cleaned up at least.
Well, this would be an opportune time to clean it up prior to launching a new system, so that when you do launch that system, it's actually up to date.
Yeah, we'll put that on the forecast list, agenda forecast list, so we'll have it on there.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the IT staff does regular updates, narrative updates, so I'll make sure you get the next one, and we'll address that.
And just real quick, do we have a time frame on the implementation of the development services permitting system? I know that's been on the docket for a while, and I know it's a huge undertaking, but I just want to make sure we have a clear goal of objective.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, yes, and the same thing, there is a narrative that we get internally, that I do from time to time share with council. I'll get you the latest one. You'll see where that is, and it does tie to the CIP too. There's a recurring item in there for that. We'll get to that.
Joe or Scott, if I may, how does this workload compare from a resource standpoint to last year? I know we're proposing cutting 1.5 in IT. Are we going to rely on consultants to implement this? I'm just trying to get a sense of the workload versus the resources that we are allocating.
Yeah, so each project has budget in it, a project manager. Now, whether that gets allocated towards a permanent staff member or an outside consultant, but there is money in each of these, there's funds set aside in each of these projects for a project manager. And the model right now that the IT director, Mr. Mallory's been using, is using a consultant for the outside project manager.
And we're confident from a change management standpoint, we can embrace all these things from an implementation standpoint, regardless of the resources required, but in terms of organizational shift to deal with these new ways of doing things, we can accommodate all this. I'm just trying to understand. I know last year was aggressive. The year before, from an IT, we were playing catch up. Is this equally aggressive, or is this scaled down?
And Charles Mallory is available if need be. But the answer is yes, and we've been making good progress. For example, the new web page and all that was put up over a year ago. And we're living proof today with the new system, the AV system here in the chamber. So they're chipping away at it. Now, I will caution you, I am guaranteeing that we're going to keep working, making progress. We won't complete all of this in the fiscal year, but we'll complete some of it and make progress, and we'll keep the council up to speed on that progress. You'll get regular updates.
Yeah, Scott, I have a couple of comments if available. Yeah, to the City Council, hello and good afternoon. Just wanted to let you know, with respect to a change management process, we try to bake in the change management process for all implementation of projects, because what ends up happening is the acceptance of those projects is very important. So we do bake in a change management process where we help people get acclimated. In terms of the permitting system, I think Councilmember Persek asked about that. I believe that the end date that's scheduled is September 30th. We are a little behind, but we are working through a plan to get back on track. But right now the date is September 30th.
Thanks, Charles.
Okay, is council okay to move on to the next slide? Okay, thank you. Okay, other items, we have the Hawthorne Jail contract, which I know Chief Whalen is available to speak to that, but that is a budget neutral item. And then a small number of positions reclassified in salary range adjustments, and one of them, I believe, is on the agenda tonight for the council meeting for the Development Services Director. Any questions about the Hawthorne Jail contract or the second bullet point? Okay. Now we're going to touch on the CIP, so I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Mitnick.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're pretty much on schedule with the goal to be wrapped up at 5 o'clock. We'll see. We certainly have time to go on if need be. So just as a reminder, one of your key goals is to ensure we have a solid infrastructure that supports an appealing, safe, and effective community. We wanted to remind you that's our guiding force on infrastructure. Very quick in terms of sample projects completed, we did get a number of projects done, however small. The police firing range improvement, Indiana water main replacement, Acacia Park, that opened last week. And right now, as we're speaking, I'm sure that park is packed with people. I did receive communication from the council. You were there or saw it. What a nice amenity and benefit. And we were able to deliver that during a very severe pandemic. So council, thank you for your leadership and support to do that project. The pavement rehab projects, we chip away as best we can on sidewalks and curbs, gutters, that type of thing. As I've shared with you, we should be doing more, but we do the best we can with our limited resources. The rec park softball bleachers replacement project, it's very popular. I'm glad we were able to deliver that. Library Park, the residential sidewalks, we're chipping away as best we can. The El Segundo Boulevard Improvements Project, the hockey rink rehab, Park Place Transportation Extension Design Contract, big deal. Thanks to the council's leadership and perseverance with the COG and with MTA, we were able to secure a little over $5 million for the design. We'll come back to you, I believe, in a couple months, right, Elias, with a contract to move that project forward. That's a $100 million project ultimately, including land acquisition and construction. That will take a number of years, but we're making significant improvements on the design. Rec Park, the checkout building restrooms. I know, council, you want us to do more at Rec Park, but we're starting to deliver. And in a few months, that project will be done. And the plunge design, we're coming to council, I believe, the next meeting with the design component. And we'll talk about that project. Now, here's some pictures before and after. We'll go through quickly. That's the range before. That's what it looks like today. Well, that's a typo. Acacia Park, sorry about that. We'll have to invest in a spell check. And that's after. Move on. Some other pictures of it after. I'm sorry we don't have pictures of families or children. We're not allowed to do that. If we could, I'd show you how great it is. Here's a pavement rehab off of Imperial before, after. Rehab on Pine before, after, and we go on with some others before and after. The bleachers before and after. Some shelving before and after. These are little projects, but they're still important. I'm very proud of this one. From almost day one, I heard complaints about this. We did deliver 57 flower pot poles, right, Elias? 57 or 60, whatever it is.
58.
58, we did them all, before and after. Lots of positive feedback from downtown merchants. And we move on. Okay, so the proposed projects. We have the funding in the carryover column, and then in what's recommended for the year coming up, there's a total of 16.1 million. Most of that's outside the general fund. And 6.1 million has been completed in the new projects or ongoing at 9.9. So we'll give you a sample of that. And we do have a sheet that shows all of this, but I wanted to go through, and we're gonna go through pretty quickly on the water fund. Okay, there's some projects that you have delineated there. Let's go by this sheet.
And Mr. Mitnick, do you mind if I point something out?
Go ahead, Joe.
So about 3 years ago, we developed a 3-year CIP plan. And then this is the first year that the city has developed a 5-year CIP plan. So thanks to Elias Sassoon, the Public Works Director, and his team, they were able to get there. And then next year, our plan is to have a formal 5-year CIP book, which I think will be very informative for both the policymakers, city council, and constituents.
Right, and to clarify, and the booklet will be very helpful to you. And Joe and I, in our previous professional lives, we're used to that, so we're bringing that here. What you are approving, though, on June 15th is the continuation of the carryovers. That's our money's already been appropriated, you carry it over, and then the first year, which would be 21, 22. The 4 subsequent years is for illustration purposes only. You are not committing to that. We are just showing you what's anticipated or estimated for the future. So that's just to illustrate and help you to mentally prepare for what the future obligations will be. So that the annual water main maintenance, that shows you it's about $2 million a year. Now this is an enterprise fund, so these only the water fund can be used for these projects. Same with the wastewater fund, only the wastewater fund can be used for those projects. We'll go on now to the transportation funds.
Can you back up?
Sure.
The lifeguard pump station?
Sure.
So does that mean we're done soon? We're gonna have that plumbed? Is that what we're saying? That's plumbing, right? Because right now it has to be septic removed. Is that saying that this will be complete in this current year?
Correct. That money, I think, that project has not been done, and it's actually probably a lot more expensive than that, if I remember correctly. And Elias, you can jump in if need be, but that's a significant cost to pump up the waste from the Grand Avenue restroom facility there at the beach. It's more cost effective to use the septic tank. I don't know what we're going to do with that on the long haul. It's kind of in limbo right now. It's on our to-do list to take a look at, well, how much would it actually cost? How would we pay for it? And this is an issue I've been trying to make sense out of it, and working with Elias and the previous public works directors and council. I know you've made me aware there's apparently this understanding of some sort with the county or with somebody or with Hyperion to do something. We can't find it. Can't find any written document that says how it'll be paid for. But there is, we did have a line item in the wastewater fund with this amount to do it, but it's going to cost more. So then that is a benefit cost analysis. Is that really worth it? So it's on hold. We'll have to come back.
No progress with the county? I know we were talking to them about their share on the parking lot.
We haven't even got to that, sir.
Okay.
So it's on our list. I know there's some strong feelings about it, but I can't find any written documents. I don't know, Dave, do you want to chime in on that? Okay, so we'll put that on our to-do list and get back to council with an understanding.
That could be an interesting proposal for the Beaches and Harbors Commission with Gary Jones.
It could be. And so there, if it wasn't for the pandemic, we would be on this issue. I've shared with some of you some thoughts about what can be done with that parking lot and the whole El Segundo Beach. It's really part of a bigger picture, and once we have some more time, we get back to normal, be happy to brainstorm.
Not
about
to
that.
belabor it, but the building was done, I think it was former councilman Jim Bulgarides who had the idea, lifeguard, firefighter. One of those. Was he a firefighter first or lifeguard? I forget. Anyway, that thing needs to be redone. It is so corroded, so it's not just about pumping out the waste, but that is a direct reflection on El Segundo. We call that El Segundo Beach. And I know we have cleaning crews. I see them all the time out there, going out there and cleaning it.
Yep.
And so we need to be thinking about how we're going to fix that entire facility. Because it's becoming an eyesore and potentially dangerous.
Yeah, and I remember when I first got here 2 years ago, and I was taken down there for a tour, and the rust on the railings was dangerous. And then how people were parking their bikes, locking it up. I mean, I gotta be careful saying this in public, you'll get mad at me. But I would like to put it on next year's work plan. We'll start thinking about it now, but I've shared with some of you individually, it's a tremendous opportunity. That whole parking lot, beach, that building, it's a tremendous opportunity. And the partnership with Gary Jones can be incredible if we do it right.
Okay, but if this is a 5-year plan, which is not in there currently, so we're saying we're gonna put that on the 5-year roadmap?
Oh,
and
we
allocate funds?
would have to. We'll come back, council. Let
Okay,
me make a
thanks.
note to come back with not just the sewer line, but the bigger parking lot, beach because there really is some exciting opportunities with that parking lot and the beach. And we could deliver something that the El Segundo residents should be proud of, and they'll go to their beach before they run over to Manhattan Beach or elsewhere. It has that type of potential. But we have limited capacity and focus as your staff to take that on. But Gary Jones is receptive. I had a very sort of preliminary discussion without getting any details, and he said, hey, let's sit down and talk it through and see what's possible. So we'll put that on our to-do list. So we'll move on now to the transportation funds, which include gas tax, Prop C, SB1, Measure R, Measure M. No carryovers. Now, these are monies that come in for specific projects. So I mentioned Park Place. So you'll see over 3 years, the money coming in from MTA. That's to cover the design. Roadway rehab projects, El Segundo Boulevard projects. Some of that is MTA money, and sidewalk maintenance. It's all spelled out with dedicated revenue sources. So $5.6 million worth of projects. We wish we could do more. Next, Stormwater Fund. This is the Measure W. These are the monies that come in for those projects. Then you have special revenue funds. Again, this does also speak to, we have like routine maintenance projects that we do through CIP. Ideally, we would have a separate fund that handles this, and we wouldn't be treated as CIP. But we do have on the Civic Center maintenance and repairs. There are ongoing projects that are taking place now, and then projects, it's really maintenance for next year and future years. The entryway projects, this is the 1% for the arts. So there was $300,000 appropriated for Main and Imperial. That's on hold. We're going to get back on that. We'd like to carry that money over and to deliver an entry feature, not a big arts project, but a nice entry feature, as the council said that you would like. So that we're keeping that money alive.
This is the gateway?
Yeah.
So it's not going to be a gateway, it's going to be well, that's probably a different discussion.
Yeah, but this, we're going to have to come back on policy direction. If you look on the agenda forecast, we're coming back, but this is the funding. So we're keeping that funding alive without a specific project.
Scott, I would just say, if we're gonna build that thing, we think we're going to, whatever it becomes, shouldn't we set aside some money for maintenance of that too? As it's going to be some structure of sorts that it will require something, won't it?
Yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Okay.
Because we don't know what it is or how much, but yes, we're gonna
I would
have
just
to.
suggest that just so we don't underestimate, we earmark something going forward for whatever asset we're adding to the city.
Okay,
We know there's gonna be an expense there, let's do our best to estimate what that's gonna be.
okay, so let's see what we can do between now and June 15th and deal with that. Thank you. So we got that, Joe. I wrote add maintenance. Then Park Vista, every year we try to put something in there. There's $60,000. This is from the housing fund. And we'll come back with a bigger plan for those projects at Park Vista as time goes by. And then if you look down, so item number 4, these are routine projects. The disabilities ramp projects, we use CDBG funds. The women's locker room at the police department, we would use asset forfeiture and development impact funds. Fire stations 1 and 2, carpet, and then other projects in future years. This is a bare minimum maintenance and capital improvement program budget for the general fund. Woefully inadequate, but the best we can do given the pandemic and the impact on our revenues. Now we go down to general fund. And just a few projects. Safe routes to school, HVAC citywide, a tiny amount of money for plumbing and electrical. And these are like must-have projects that building maintenance staff have identified that we have to do. And then going down to project 17 through 23. These are the carryover projects. Joe, can you move on? Okay, so I'll spend a little bit of time. We talked about the plunge. There's $1.5 million sitting in an account for this project. We're going to come back to you. That money's still there. We will come back to you on the 18th with a revised design proposal, and that design proposal's gone through the Rec and Park Commission, I believe. And then we just show nothing in this year's budget, and then $1.5 million we just speculate going forward. We have a better sense now what the cost is going to be. We'll address that on the 18th. And we'll come up with a game plan how to do that project. But the council, you made it abundantly clear. So I'm reiterating for the 5 of you and then everybody who's viewing this, this city is strongly committed to rehabbing the plunge and getting it open at some point in the near future. You'll have a greater discussion of that on May 18th and on future dates. We are showing the existing money continuing to be carried over. So view the 1.5 as a starting point. The school district also has a commitment of about, I think it's $1 million. So in essence, there's $2.5 million sitting there as a starting point. The next one is the rec park projects. Now, Joe, we focus on that. That's the $800,000 that you previously appropriated. We're carrying that over. And those projects will be determined after the needs assessment is done. And if you look at your agenda forecast, we're coming back to you in November. You asked for a shorter time frame to come back. We will do that in November. And then you'll make decisions about which projects to tackle. This is a starting point for the funding for that.
I just have a question.
Mhm.
So you know how we have the charging station here for the city hall?
We do.
You know, with the federal environment where they're pushing, you know, the green energy, putting out, you know, transition to new electric cars, should we be looking for other charging station areas? You know, and we don't really have, I didn't see anything here about the maintenance of that. So I'm not, you know, is that something, if this is gonna be a 5-year plan, we should be putting something out there, our plan for additional charging stations?
Okay.
So I can address the maintenance of it. So we actually contract, the one out there's contract with a company called ChargePoint, and they are fully responsible for the maintenance and the operation of it.
And then the other question, you know, the mayor mentioned that we were about $40 million behind in CIP investment, now probably about 60 million. And, you know, if we're only spending 4 million, 3 million, we're not actually bringing down that, you know, we're not addressing that deficit. So shouldn't we be planning more money into the CIP because we have underfunded it last year, we're underfunding it this year, or this fiscal 21-22. We're not, the 4 million, that's just gonna be regular maintenance. Like, where's the additional money to start actually investing in our CIP where we haven't done in the past?
And that's our challenge going forward. And we'll have some thoughts.
I'm glad that you opened that up, because I think when I look at that 4 million for Rec Park, I know we don't have the numbers yet. How much of that is gonna, what will that accomplish? Is that like 20% of what the Rec Park needs? When you look at the bathrooms, you look at Joslyn, you look at all the different facilities there, are we just scratching the surface? What is that gonna get us? Because to Carol's point, I was trying to calculate mentally, what are actually new or remodeled projects versus just hanging on for dear life? And it strikes me that the vast majority of these are just hanging on, with the exception of the plunge and the rec park. Plunge we've been talking about for years, and we've got some dedicated funds already. Rec park doesn't seem that significant to me as a number. And so my concern is the same as I said earlier today. It looks to me, based on this, it's gonna take us 20 years to just catch up.
Well, this is the beauty of this exercise. You're now seeing the value of doing the long-term planning for CIP. We're happy to increase those numbers so it stays in front of us that we're gonna need more to deal with that.
We keep promising, I think, we keep promising our residents, we declare over and over that these things have been not addressed for years. We need to address them, and to your point, we aren't allocating the proper funds. I don't know where the funds are gonna come from, and we're gonna borrow money to do capital improvement projects, which we're gonna have a rating, and I think I've said before, I'm not opposed to raising money to address these needs. But then how do we pay for it from a cash flow standpoint? And it gets back to what I said earlier, is that we haven't cut enough to do any of this.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted on the record that I'm concerned that, given what I saw in projections and how we're dipping into the fund for the next 4 years or whatever it is, and knowing that we have nominal funds set aside for capital improvement, we're gonna be in a hole for a long time.
And what you're seeing, and it struck me when I first came here, when we think about the future, we think about just maintaining what we have, right? And then the challenges too, when we took on the Aquatic Center and Campus El Segundo, those are new facilities, they're awesome, but the recurring maintenance. And we didn't really think it through. I'm not being critical, but I'm just looking at it analytically. but the beauty of doing this long-term planning, now you have to start thinking about that. And I'm happy to increase those numbers, but they really reflect just sort of hanging on. So good thoughts. By the way, I did misspeak on the plunge. We're coming to you on June 1st, not May 18th. So we'll come back to you with the design on June 1st.
Mr. Mayor, I think you're making great points. I think that we should give ourselves a little bit of credit for what we've done coming out of this year and some of the policies that we've made. And, you know, Councilmember Persick mentioned, you know, what we did, what we're doing with the POBs, what we did with the Top Golf revenue, right? This dais, minus Councilmember Giroux, you know, voted to bring in Top Golf, right? To take a negative line item on our budget to a positive line item. As much as I know Councilmember Giroux is in support of that and he would have voted for it wholeheartedly, you know, we have now then kind of set aside, hey, that revenue's going here, okay? The POBs, that sets us with a set payment moving forward into the future, right? So we are taking those steps to find that money. You know, if COVID isn't in this conversation and let's say TOT comes back online, right? And we don't have that minus, that doesn't mean we have to go out and buy new cars. That doesn't mean we have to go out and, hey, every department gets 5 new employees. We don't have to do that. We can come out of this like wiser, right? And so I guess I've always looked at government as we are the Titanic. We turn so very slow, but we are making a turn right now, and we are setting ourselves up to be very, very successful moving forward. And the other thing I was thinking about is when you look at that $40 million, the facility assessment that was done, you know, that's talking about, I mean, you got a clubhouse that has been in bad shape since I was in elementary school here. Okay, I mean, but if you go back, I mean, Mike Gordon tried to, when he was in that chair, he tried to bring forth, you know, like that was going to be this like recreation center with a gym and people could come down and all the residents, it was like a gym facility for the residents, and it didn't end up going through because many of the residents there were like, absolutely not, you're not building that monstrosity at the bottom of my hill. But that building has needed love since then. And if you look back to when it was originally built, or if like you read the story, there was a story in the Breeze, I want to say it was like a year and a half ago, about Rec Park and how Rec Park was, you know, how much money was spent when it was originally purchased and the original design, and then how like the Bobby Sox field was purchased after the fact, like that parcel to add that on, and those funds, and how those funds were raised at that time. It wasn't done on like a 5-year CIP. Right? It was like, okay, hey, here's the plan. We got to do this. Where are we going to get it? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to borrow it, and we're going to pay for it over these years. So I think when it comes down to the clubhouse or the Joslin Center, yes, our residents may feel like we're piecemealing it right now and scratching the surface here and there on things. But, you know, that's why this council member didn't vote for windows at City Hall. You know, because I think, again, that's scratching the surface on a building that may be completely repurposed. You know, so I would not go as so far as to spend, you know, $500,000 at Joslin or another $500,000 at Clubhouse. It would be like, hold on a second, what exactly does Joslin need? Do we like Joslin there? Do the people that utilize Joslin actually like how it's set up? Because I don't know about you guys, but only time I go to Joslin Center is for for this budget study session, typically, right, or strategic planning, and or for Little League meetings. Maybe slow pitch softball during the summer manager meetings, right? But we don't utilize that facility. So there's so much work that we have to do before we can even figure out how we're going to pay for it. But we are taking steps today to get us there. So give yourself a little bit of credit.
Well, as my family will tell you, I'm not easily satisfied. So while we've made great progress the last 5 years, I'm just acknowledging that even to your point, if we come in at budget, we come in the general fund budget, it still will take us maybe not 15 to 20 years, but 10 to 12 years to tackle these things. And all I'm pointing out is that we have a long way to go in capital improvement projects. And yeah, we've made a great job. You guys on pension committee, Dr. Brand and I, prior to that, I think we've saved, what, $9 million probably collectively over the last 4 years, if not more, on pensions. Joe, what's the number?
12 million.
12 million. So I'm not dismissing any of that. I'm saying we've done some great things and we have much more work to do is all I'm saying. I'm just acknowledging that. And it either comes down to finding ways to reduce our overhead, our expenses, or raising revenues. And I'm just saying I'm not prepared to go out and tax the public, the base. I'm saying let's get creative to find other ways to pay for things, that's all. Or to reduce expenses.
I'll throw in just my 2 cents. I think philosophically, we have approached a degree of structural balance that I don't think 2 years ago many people would have thought that possible. It was a really difficult outlook, particularly for 2029, 2030, 2031. So the idea that those things are lining up now is good, and I think Joe, you could probably bear witness to, if not for a pandemic, we were going to be looking at a significant surplus. And I think with all of the development and the sort of optimistic air around El Segundo, I think we are maybe in a little bit better shape on CIP than we think for the future.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
I can't let this one go. How are we going to accurately assess what our CIP needs are? We did a study that's now probably antiquated, given what's happened around us with inflationary materials. How are we going to reassess that? Because I would like to have an accurate picture so that we can look our constituents in the eye and say, yeah, we'd love to do this, and we have this huge mountain ahead of us. And even with the surplus, we would have that huge mountain ahead of us. So I would like to fully understand what that number is.
Could be as simple as taking that facility assessment study that prior Public Works Director, Kim Berkman did, and just applying.
Yes, thank you so much. So we have a contract with a consulting firm. In fact, we have a meeting coming up latter part of this week. We're going to be walking through all the facilities. We're going to identify all the needs for every facility. We're also going to do the survey, and we're going to be listening to our residents, and we want them to tell us how would they like for us to, what do they want, what do they want to get out of these facilities? Well, what do they have in mind? And as part of this contract with them, they're not only going to do the cost estimate, but they're also going to come and tell us the priority. And we will keep the city council informed of not just what the cost is, but what is the priority list. And we go from there. And from that point on, it would be up to city council to appropriate the particular facility with the funding, which gets designed and it gets built. So that's what we plan to do.
That's awesome. When will that happen?
Yeah.
We expect the study to be done by November of this year. As you recall, the last time we came to the city council wanted us to put a rush on this
So
project.
This is the project we approved at the last
Right.
meeting.
We
Okay,
did.
That's
So-
for the rec park projects.
Yeah, that's just the rec park.
That's the rec park.
Taking the overall needs assessment and just tripling the lumber costs probably gets you somewhere there. But also we have a CIP CCB that would love a task.
Yeah.
As opposed to a survey, they would love a task.
They did meet and weighed in on what's in front of you today.
Okay, to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, we have some really smart people on that, including at least one general contractor, I think, if
Right.
Mike Rotolo's still on there. Why don't we ask that group to extrapolate what that number has become going forward based on their intimate knowledge of the industry?
We can do that.
Because otherwise, we're going to spend $250,000 to go through that process all over again, probably.
Yeah, well, again, we hear you loud and clear, and that will take place during the year. But we're trying to get through this pandemic and balance the budget and do the projects that are in front of us going forward as we get into a true multi-year capital improvement program budget. We'll look at these projects, identify what the true costs are to build them out, and then to maintain them on a recurring basis. We'll disclose the funding sources and where we're deficient and give the council options. You will tell us what your priorities are and how to do it.
Mr. Minnick, if I may, if the council doesn't object, I would like to see that, I forget the capital improvement panel, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Come back to us with preliminary numbers on what they think that old number will become before the June session.
Oh.
Anyone opposed?
This is labor neutral to you. This is our CCB. This is our committee who has been begging us to give them a good task. And I think that this is a good meaty one. I think you may be onto something, Mr. Mayor, with that. This would be, sort of staff neutral. I mean, just call them up, and I think they'll be ready to go on it.
We can do that.
We can have a
I
meeting
think- yeah,
I
do
also
that.
think,
Yeah.
I also think that'll be a really good idea because if you guys recall from that assessment, there were things on there and price tags associated with it that were absurd. It was absolutely absurd. And so if that group actually went through that line by line, that 40 million may be like, well, here's the reality. Like, no, that we're not going to do that and we're not going to do that. That 40 is actually 20. And here are the 10 projects that we truly need to work on. I had another idea, and I hope this doesn't become a soundbite or get taken out of context. When I think about, I was sitting here thinking about the clubhouse, and I was thinking what the primary use of the clubhouse is, right? It's mostly kids, but there's a stage in there, right? So there's a lot of art that goes on in there, right? There's lots of art, and so moving forward, like the 1% for the arts, could it be, or is it allowed with that policy for us to use any of that money in the future, not today, obviously, because we've already decided where it's going, but maybe pull some aside to update that facility. I don't know if any of you have had kids in the productions there, right? Maybe all of you. But we've all been there, and it could use some love. And that is directly associated with the arts in this town and the programming of the arts. So just an idea, just throwing it out there, and that could also be a way that, you're talking about how, like, what is our plan for funding it? That could be one of our plans.
I had that same very similar idea. And I was talking to Melissa, the director, and I was actually talking about the teen center. And is there a way we could actually just gut the inside of the teen center and make it actually an event center and paint it and use some of the arts money and have productions in that teen center so that it's actually properly used? So that's one of the things we had talked about. So it's very similar.
That's a good idea.
Thank you.
So Scott, Mr. Minnick, is it safe to assume you'll come back on both those points before June? We'll ask that CIP, CCB to revisit the numbers and adjust for today. And then to Councilmember Nichols' point, just research that idea. I think that's...
We could do that, reconvene the committee. Elisha will have to coordinate that, have them go through the long-term projects to help come up with an estimate for the cost to build them out.
And Councilman Nichols' idea too about the arts.
And
Can
look
we
to
use
see if
that?
the 1% for the arts
Yeah.
can be used for the clubhouse art stuff. Yeah, as long as yeah, we can answer that question. Yeah, as long as it's public art, I think that might be okay. Okay, so we're wrapping up. We had some of the carryover projects: the library park activation, the checkout building, etc. Okay, and then the total. So when it says 51 projects, that's for multiple years. It's really 32 in the carryover in next year. They're really project categories. So those are the numbers, but we heard you loud and clear for the out years, the out 4 years. Let's get a more realistic estimate, and we appreciate that. And if we have quorum issues or getting the committee is challenging, we'll still figure out a way to come to you on June 15th with answers to that question. Okay, so we move on. I think, Joe, you can hit
Scott,
these
are we
quickly.
okay starting closed late?
Yeah, we're going to be done in about 2
Okay.
minutes, so we're going to go very quickly to wrap up.
Yeah, so I'll touch real quick on the CalPERS pension update. So CalPERS ended last year, June 30, 2020, 2.3% below their target of 7%. So that added another liability of $6.4 million. This year, we're on target. CalPERS is on target. Looks like to end the year at 15%. So that would be 8% above their 7% annual target. That would put an investment gain of $23 million. So that would obviously wipe out that $6 million in additional unfunded liability from last year, and leave just a little under $17 million in investment gain. Now CalPERS is talking about reducing the discount rate from 7% down to either 6.5% or 6.75%. The CalPERS board will vote on that in November of 2020, and that any change would be implemented July of 2022. So it looks pretty much like they are going to do one or the other, 6.5% or 6.75%. So that investment gain that we would have on the books, that would help offset that additional discount rate reduction. Reserve balances, so general funds, 15.5 million. I was rounding up to 16 million here. Economic uncertainty at 2 million. Workers' comp fund, 7.3 million, or 70% funded. And then general liability, only about 33% funded, with just under $500,000.
Joe, do we pay when we get medical claims? Does that come out of the workman's comp fund, or are we paying that out of the general fund?
If it's a medical claim related to a active approved workers' comp claim, yes, it comes out of the workers' comp fund.
Okay, but not a retiree medical claim.
No.
That comes out of the general fund. So that's a separate appropriation.
Yeah. So if it's a retiree, so I don't want to get into workers' comp law here, but if it's a retiree, they do have a certain period to put in a claim, and if that claim then gets approved under workers' comp, it will come out of the workers' comp fund. It does not come out of the general fund.
Good.
And that includes any any settlements that council would agree to. That comes out of the workers' comp fund as well. Trust balances, so the pension trust. This actually should have been updated. So 4.3 million is where we were last June. We did not do any new contributions, but we're up to 4.9 million right now currently. So about 600,000 in investment gains we've had between June last year and through the end of April of this year. OPEB trust, 32.5 million. Again, 58% funded, and one of the requests is to withdraw the 2.4 million to help balance this year's budget. And I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Mitnick.
Or the home stretch, go quickly. You've seen some of this before. So we talked about how we'll do the budget strategy. This is just reiterating what's already been in front of you. We can go to the next one. You went too fast. Again, these are options. I won't go through them all. Well, we could do across the board cuts, hiring freeze. So if the current situation is prolonged and it becomes dire, these are tools we have available to us in the toolbox. Hopefully we do not have to do these things, but we are positioned to do that. I want to go to the next page, and then on the labor contracts, that's going to be challenging. All right, we're going to have to see where we are at that point in time and what the options are. All right, it's not going to be easy, but in an effort to be transparent, I have to point out to you on the public safety negotiations, it's going to be challenging. Ideally, for recurring cost increases, we need recurring revenues to pay for that. And if we can't, one of them has to give. And here's a variety of other options. You've heard me say this over and over and over. Go to the next page. That last page Joe skipped over, that was just a summary of what, we'll go back. I want to just repeat, these are the measures we took to come up with the $9 million. They're there on that page. We go to the last page in terms of our next steps. Okay, so the end of this fiscal year, the 9-month fiscal year, is June 30th. The year-end audit for 2021, that will start, that will go from June to November. The CAFR presentation for this year will be on, is that right? December 7th? That's not right.
That's our goal.
Oh, that's the goal for that. Okay. Now for the budget that's coming up, the citywide fee resolution is coming to you in June. The budget hearings on June 15th. The beginning of the fiscal year is July 1. Then we'll start preparing, as we get closer to December, we'll start preparing the biennial 2-year format. So it'll be 2 1-year budgets, but we just do it all at once. We come to you with mid-year, and as we get closer to the beginning of the second year, with adjustments. But we still need your approval to do that. But we're pointing out this is a best management practices. We're a little behind the curve in not having this format, but we'll be in front of you in a few months to see if you're interested in doing that. There are a lot of benefits and cost savings on staff time. All right, and I think that's it. So now it's time for questions. We have heard what you would like us to do and the changes, including the long-term out years on CIP. So when we come back on June 15th, we have that as part of the overall budget in front of you. Bare bones budget, no frills. I do want to thank all the council for your direction and patience with us, but also the men and women in the city organization led by our department heads to get to this point. This was not easy during a pandemic. And that concludes staff's presentation. We're available for questions.
Just one thing. I think since I've sat in this chair on council, we've discussed a lot of, technology implementations where, we had Chad Hahn hosted a roundtable, and it came back where it was, it's all about process, right? And it's not create a new technology. It's what technology is out there. How are we implementing it, and what new processes are we putting into place? What I think would be really helpful coming out of a budget study session is, Mr. Mitnick, if you could come back to us and say, since you came here, here's some of the things that we've put into place. And I don't want this to sound like we are trying to replace the men and women that work so hard for our city and make our city as great as we are, but it's what technology upgrades have we put in place to help them become more efficient, to help them do the job that we're asking them to do better, quicker, more regularly, so that we can do more with less. Because I think that's been an initiative of ours, and I think the theme of today was, hey, we need to find more money, right? We have so many bills hanging out there and things that we just keep kicking the can down the road on, that if this council starts thinking about their time in this chair and how long they're going to be in this chair and getting things done while they're in this chair, it's, well, I better start banging that drum now, And so I think it would be very helpful for not just us, but also the public to see, here's what we're doing, here's where we're seeing the most progress, and, here's the salary savings, and here's this, here's that.
Okay.
And, sorry. I'm just going to tag on to that real quickly. One of the things when we talk about the KPIs, KPIs are really to highlight areas that you need improvement. So at that same time, we could be talking about some of the initiatives or the process changes we did as a result of what the KPIs told us. Because the KPIs shouldn't be the end result. The change to the organization should be the end result.
This is my time to bang the table in support of code enforcement. We've got a pilot program for a short-term ordinance that's going to come online, and we're adding all sorts of things and capabilities for people to do, whether it's ADUs or beekeeping or any of these things. Like having someone who does nights and weekends, when those violations pop up, instead of sending police officers to do it, because police officers are there to enforce the law, not code things, I will tell those things recoup themselves in value to residents very, very quickly. And I know we have frozen positions. That position is a fraction of what a police lieutenant is, and I think we see immediate benefit and happier residents because of it. So I'll pound the table for that. Also, I would make sure that in our general administration pieces for the general fund that we have enough set aside for litigation to pay lawyers and things. I'm happy to see that in ICRMA, our liability piece, we continue to do really excellent risk management. But when we think we need to defend the interests of the city, I think we need to make sure that we have things set aside to do that, whether it's with our neighbors or other elements. So please make sure those numbers are good, because those numbers get big very quickly, and we want to make sure we're prepared for it.
To the Mayor Pro Tem's point, are we freezing a code enforcement person, or are you suggesting that another one, Chris, for the weekends?
We have no one who does nights and weekends.
We
so
need
we
that.
end up
I
sending-
agree. I can't tell you how many emails and phone calls I've gotten recently because there's an illegal Airbnb going on and no one's available, or it's relegated to the police.
We send, police are chasing loud neighbor things, and they get there, and it's not a legal function, right? It's a civil function. We have civil ordinances on there, and we really, really need, things that are driven by the state, and ADU stands out like they are attractive nuisances for code issues, and we need a mechanism to enforce it besides sending police to go do it.
Anyone opposed to asking that be addressed before June, adding that in as an insertion?
Not opposed at all. That's one of the things I brought up, is that it does us no good to have all these policies and procedures and all these things. It takes all the staff time to write down and 4 meetings to vote on it, and then we have no one to actually enforce it. And that's 100% what's happened. The Airbnbs are a perfect example.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, agree completely. We are behind the 8 ball in terms of the the number of human beings. You're talking about the importance of human beings in that area. You get tremendous bang for your buck when that's properly funded, if you will. And that will be a task of the new Development Services Director too, to look at what's the best way to deliver that. We have some thoughts and ideas, but it does come down to money. But we hear you loud and clear. And this last weekend is a great example. We can't get into the details here, but for the viewing public and city employees that are watching, we had a situation where the quality of life in the neighborhood was significantly impacted. I was getting communicated with each day, but I did not have a code enforcement officer that could go out and deal with it. We did make the police aware, and they were keeping an eye on it.
So, Mr. Minnick, are you gonna wait, are we waiting until the new Development Services Director
we'll
comes on
have-
board? Or are we
I'll
gonna
include it
allocate
through-
appropriate funds for that, for them to?
Yeah, let me think about it and come back on June 15th with the budget hearing. We'll address this issue in front of you, and we'll try to come up with a game plan.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for raising that.
Are we, so I know we're behind schedule, that's
Well,
mostly,
we're
mostly
done.
my fault. Should we, so we're adjourning and we are going to close session across the Civic Plaza? And how much time do the council members need for that? 5-minute bathroom break maybe before? Okay, let's say 5:20. Do you want us to open closed here or do you want us to do it there? Does it matter? We're opening closed. We're opening closed session. We're gonna take a 7-minute break. We'll reconvene at 5:20 p.m. Thank you.